There have been restraints since the independence of the African countries from their colonizers that kept them from developing. Despite being a continent of 1.4 billion people and 54 countries, Africa could not gain the power and influence it was supposed to. That's because the West ensured Africa remains in perpetual conflicts and problems that deprive Africans of the time to think about getting power. However, things have changed now. We have seen a wave of coups in Africa that has put loyal leaders in power. Not only that, but Africa is diversifying its allies, establishing stronger relations with China and Russia. When these two countries become allies of Africa, it makes the West irrelevant. The West fears losing entire Africa because allies like China and Russia will help Africa stand on its legs and exercise its power. Just recently, China revealed 5 strategies the African countries should follow to beat the West without anyone's help. Note that China is offering all support but wants African countries to beat their enemies by themselves. It's because Africa is able to do it, and allies like China and Russia will help it do so. But what are these strategies that have scared the West? How have China and Russia's relations with African countries already tied the West in Africa? Let's know about that in this video. For decades, Africa has witnessed a notable presence of foreign military personnel, with over a dozen countries deploying troops and establishing bases across the continent. All of these foreign militaries were West's. A 2019 report by the Institute of Security Studies, based in South Africa, identified at least 13 countries with a military presence in Africa and around 11 foreign military bases in the Horn of Africa. The United States and its allies, including France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, Belgium, Japan, and India, constitute a significant portion of the countries with military deployments on the continent. Djibouti, situated in the Horn of Africa, has garnered significant attention, hosting at least 8 foreign military bases, including those of the US, France, Japan, and China. Djibouti's strategic location at the southern entrance to the Red Sea, acting as a crucial bridge between Africa and the Middle East, makes it a key geopolitical hotspot. All this makes it clear that independence, which African countries got, was actually a well-thought strategy built by the West. They offered independence in such a way that the African nations always stayed under the West's shadow. African political analyst Lasiba Tefo emphasizes that superpowers aim to position their deployment strategically to ensure access to resources and ammunition in case of warfare. He points out that the rush to establish military bases is not unique to Africa, citing global instances such as the conflict in Ukraine. Professor Ahmed Jazbai from the University of South Africa adds that the competition for foreign military bases in Africa goes beyond resource extraction and is driven by competing geopolitical interests. The presence of world powers in Africa reflects their efforts to advance their interests on the continent and globally. You should know that the drive for military presence ties in with colonialism and a desire for political power. Some African countries, particularly those ruled by authoritarian figures, are open to hosting Western military bases or forces because it helps them stay in power. Due to military presence and influence, certain Western powers control election results to ensure they have more easily controlled leaders. In turn, when these leaders come into power, they are more concerned about protecting the West's interests than serving their people. This whole cycle leaves Africans in a never-ending dilemma. The West exploits resources that could be used for development, and the African leaders do nothing. Therefore, to resolve all problems and make Africa stronger to stand against the West's exploitation, the West's influence in Africa has to end, and China has insights into that. Since China has been watching the West and its dirty actions for decades, it has charted down strategies to beat it everywhere. But for Africa, it has a different stance. Instead of fighting the West in Africa, China wants African countries to develop and become stronger to punish the West by themselves. This is a win-win strategy where China will have Africa free of the Western powers for greater collaboration. At the same time, Africa will get strategic help and insights from China in the mission to beat the West. Let's now know about these 5 genius strategies. Number 5. Africa must embrace and respect its diverse culture for national identity and unity. Africa needs a sophisticated approach that acknowledges and incorporates its diverse cultures and economic landscapes. By implementing policies that respect these diversities, African nations can pave the way for inclusive growth and stability. Moving forward requires a balanced, pragmatic, and inclusive approach that champions the fulfillment of fundamental objectives while considering the continent's diverse socioeconomic landscape. Africa must recognize the potential for a formerly colonized nation to rise and become a superpower. China's historical journey illustrates the remarkable transformation of a nation that reclaimed its identity despite the hardships of colonization and ascended to become a global powerhouse. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The shadow of colonization fell upon China after the British Navy's triumph in the First Opium War between 1839 and 1842. Subsequent foreign reigns, including the Yuan dynasty by the Mongols and the Qing dynasty by the Manchu, along with Japan's occupation from 1931 to 1945, marked tumultuous periods in Chinese history. Despite the challenges of colonization, which caused a loss of pride, dignity, and identity, China experienced an extraordinary resurgence, surpassing its former colonizers to emerge as the world's second-largest economy. Presently, one of China's crucial strategies involves cultivating national pride by embracing its history and language. This is evident in Chinese universities, where mandatory history classes anchor students in their rich heritage. Africa, similarly scarred by the ravages of colonialism, can learn valuable lessons from China's resilience. Embracing indigenous languages like Swahili, spoken by over 150 million people across the continent, and integrating it into educational curricula could foster a unique African identity distinct from borrowed colonial languages like English and French. Even if it was a strategy of European colonizers to make the colonies hate their own culture, values, and traditions, China preserved its culture. The same can be done by Africa, knowing that the West wants it to hate its history and traditions. This awareness should bolster Africans' love for their identity, rich history and culture that has been there for tens of thousands of years. Who are the Westerners to tell which culture is superior and which is not? Reclaiming cultural pride and identity is pivotal for Africa, just as China rose from the ashes of colonization by preserving its language and heritage. Africa, too, must shed its colonial mindset to reclaim its pride, dignity, and self-belief. Only then can the continent chart its unique path to greatness. Revitalization can be achieved by drawing inspiration from China's historical journey and harnessing Africa's unique cultural heritage. This approach sets the stage for a future characterized by strength, resilience, and a distinctive identity, crucial elements for success on the global stage. Number 4. Africa must have state-owned companies that safeguard its national interests and avoid exploitation of natural resources. China knows that private companies, whether local or foreign, never care about the host country as much as they care about their profits. Therefore, establishing state-owned companies that earn vast profits for the country and its people has become a genius strategy. These companies, regarded as the driving force behind the nation's economic growth, fall into the state-owned category if the government holds over 50.01% of their shares, either directly or indirectly. Noteworthy among the largest companies globally are 3 key Chinese state-owned entities: CIPC Group, China National Petroleum, and State Grid. These enterprises are estimated to contribute about half of the country's industrial output, significantly influencing China's substantial $18 trillion GDP. Back in 2020, these companies brought revenues that made 40% of China's GDP of $16 trillion. You can now understand how China has so much money and how it spends trillions on development and mega projects that bring great revenues per year. In the same way, the success of state-owned enterprises in Africa can allow African countries to reconsider their approach to government involvement in their economies. Sole reliance on tax revenue and meager mining royalties proves inadequate for national development. China's experience serves as a lesson for African nations. When commercialized and managed like private entities while retaining government ownership, state-owned enterprises can evolve into profitable vehicles for national development. Therefore, it's crucial for state-owned enterprises in Africa to actively exploit the continent's abundant natural resources actively, ensuring that the generated revenue benefits the people. Understanding that state-owned enterprises need not cover every sector of the economy, they should instead focus on the most crucial areas. But one thing is clear: allowing outsiders to own natural resources, reaping more benefits than local inhabitants, is irrational and illegal. China's model illustrates the significant positive impact state-owned enterprises can have on both the economy and the public. African nations should prioritize their state-owned enterprises, recognizing their potential to drive economic growth if managed effectively. In Africa, appropriately managing state-owned enterprises holds the potential to propel economic progress significantly. Taking cues from China's success, African countries can reassess the role of government participation in the economy. You should know that various state-owned enterprises are already working in different African countries. They own stakes in mines. However, management is flawed. They are not managed and run like private companies, which focus on profits more than anything. Therefore, despite existing, these companies are incurring a loss instead of bringing revenues. But these state-owned enterprises in Africa can serve as powerful engines for economic growth. Hence, it is crucial for these entities to actively participate in harnessing the continent's vast natural resources, ensuring that the generated profits benefit the local population. Africa must reconsider its economic strategies, avoiding over-reliance on limited revenue sources and embracing the lessons learned from successful state-owned enterprises. Leveraging the continent's natural resources through these enterprises while ensuring the benefits directly impact the local population is a key step towards sustainable and inclusive development. Number 3. Deciding strategic, economic, and political structures guided by African national interests. In this respect, China offers a practical example from its history. After establishing the People's Republic of China in 1949, the country shifted to a one-party state and initially embraced communism. Later, they transitioned to what they call a socialist education system. This educational approach in China emphasizes grooming skilled workers from a young age. The term social market economy, used to describe China's economic system, suggests a neutral approach, amalgamating aspects from various economic systems to serve national interests. China chose a one-party system with some elements of democracy to ensure stability, recognizing its necessity for development. This stability facilitated their consistent growth. You see, China did not accept the ideologies and systems the West offered to the world. Rather, Chairman Mao Zedong understood Chinese ground realities. Therefore, he formed a political structure created exclusively for China. That's why China opposed capitalism, but implemented specific capitalist policies in certain regions over time. In contrast, Africa has experienced unsuccessful attempts to embrace capitalism, socialism, and communism. The continent now confronts the need for pragmatic action to promote, advance, and safeguard its national interests. To achieve this, Africa requires a political and economic framework that ensures the fulfillment of objectives such as food security, high-quality healthcare, universal education, and economic opportunities for all. While formulating these structures, African countries should consider their political, social, and economic realities to shape the systems coherent with what Africa needs. That's the same way China's political and economic systems have transformed communism into what they term a socialistic education model. This educational approach aims to cultivate a workforce from an early age. Described as a social market economy, China's economic structure draws from multiple systems to serve the nation's best interests. Recognizing the importance of stability for development, China adopted a one-party system with limited democratic features, facilitating the country's rapid development. Despite its historical stance against capitalism, China gradually integrated some capitalist principles into specific regions, resulting in economic diversity and growth. In contrast, Africa has faced challenges in adopting various ideological models, capitalism, socialism, and communism, without substantial success. The continent is now at a critical juncture, necessitating pragmatic measures to advance and protect its interests. A redefined political and economic structure is imperative to fulfill crucial objectives, including securing food resources, establishing high-quality healthcare, providing universal education, and creating economic opportunities for all citizens. Learning from China's history, it becomes clear that Africa must pivot towards a model that caters to its specific needs, embracing a balanced approach that considers its cultural, economic, and social diversity. By devising a framework that prioritizes the welfare and growth of its people, Africa can chart a path towards sustainable development and stability. African nations must collectively construct a political and economic structure aligned with their unique context and aspirations to address these critical needs. Such a framework should guarantee immediate and sustained development, ensuring access to all citizens' basic needs, such as food, healthcare, education, and economic opportunities. Number 2, African countries should make and implement policies swiftly with zero tolerance against any breach. In 2008, while much of the world was debating how to respond, China took rapid action. Their economic stimulus plan involved a surge in public investment in infrastructure, reduced taxes, and relaxed credit restrictions for mortgages and small to medium-sized enterprises. This swift response significantly mitigated the impact of the crisis on China's economy. While the world experienced a GDP growth rate of 3% in 2008, China's economy grew by over 9%. The success of China's response is largely attributed to its fast and decisive policy implementation. Although African countries might take time to deliberate on matters, adopting a swift and decisive approach once a decision is reached could enhance their own progress. African nations should place a significant emphasis on appointing the most qualified and capable individuals for government positions. China, for instance, selects top university students to work in the public sector, underscoring the importance of having highly skilled professionals in the face of global challenges. African nations would benefit from prioritizing the recruitment of highly qualified and capable individuals for government roles. Following China's example of selecting top-performing university students for public sector positions can significantly enhance the efficiency and efficacy of governance. Today, political analysts agree that China's success largely stems from its ability to deliberate on decisions and swiftly implement them, a quality that African nations can adopt to streamline their policy execution. Furthermore, prioritizing the recruitment of the most capable and highly skilled individuals for government positions, like China's practice of selecting top university students, could significantly enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of African governance. Number 1. African countries should have long-term development and visionary programs. Today, a part of the problem in Africa is that countries do not have long-term policies and programs to pursue. In other words, African leaders come and go without undertaking any major projects, except for a few African countries like South Africa, where long-term strategies have been set. Most African countries do not have any long-term projects. Throughout its history, China has undertaken ambitious and visionary projects, including the Great Leap Forward, the Open Door Policy, and the Go Out Policy. While not all of these initiatives achieved their desired results, they had clear objectives. The economic reforms propelled by the Open Door Policy laid the foundation for rural industrialization and business reorganization, inviting foreign direct investment into China's economy. Official data from China demonstrates an outstanding reduction in the country's poverty rate, plummeting from 53% in 1981 to 2.5% in 2005, lifting an estimated 300 million individuals out of poverty. And today, there is 0% poverty in China. In total, China raised 800 million people out of poverty, which made up 75% of global poverty. This would never happen if a president were given a few years. Rather, this was a long-term plan that cost many decades, presidents, and the hard work of the Chinese nations. It really was a miracle. It was not the work of a single leader, but the whole nation's struggle. When Mao Zedong could not bring the Chinese economy back on track, another leader, Deng Xiaoping, emerged in 1978. He is credited with transforming China's economy. Despite certain reforms deviating from the communist or socialist model, Deng remained dedicated to advancing China. His famous quote, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice," emphasized his focus on economic growth. Deng's opening up strategy facilitated small-scale foreign direct investment in special economic zones, reducing bureaucratic hurdles for foreign companies and enhancing infrastructure to attract international corporations. His reforms also included restructuring, selling, merging, or closing down state-owned enterprises, transforming them into major economic drivers under the term socialism with Chinese characteristics. China's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001 further stimulated its economy through increased exports. In contemporary times, China's current leader, Xi Jinping, advocates the Chinese dream, prioritizing improving the average Chinese citizen's quality of life. African nations would benefit from implementing policies as clear, daring, and imaginative as those observed in China's history, reducing dependence on external interventions and judgments. It's important to know that African nations have the capacity to execute visionary projects effectively. It just needs some guidance, which China can offer. Until now, the economic policies of many African countries were influenced by foreign entities, relying on aid packages and loans from international institutions. But now, African countries need to articulate their vision, formulate precise plans, and take control of their development. China has no accomplishments that African nations cannot aspire to or even surpass. Belief in their capabilities, the right mindset, and self-reliance can empower African countries to achieve significant feats. Instead of duplicating China, they should draw inspiration from its success. African countries should ensure that they use China's valuable insights instead of taking direct orders. So far, South Africa has emerged as an African country that has allied itself with China, leveraging on China's economic relations with other countries. It is diversifying its relations and becoming part of the BRICS alliance that will soon have powerful members like Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries. What do you think? Can African countries beat, punish, and get rid of the West by following these strategies? Should African countries establish the same relations with China as they had with the West? Let us know your thoughts on how allying with Russia and China should be different this time to ensure African countries are not exploited. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.